awareness. And we are glad to see a lot of people who have come in for the different topics that we've presented. It's been wonderful to have our speakers talk about so many different things. I want to go through a few of the logistics that the meeting is recorded, as you probably heard just now, and everyone has been brought in on as unmuted or muted, sorry, and no video. And so we will, except for the speakers, but at the end of the each speaker, we will open it up for questions, and you can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can write your question in the chat box at any time. And was there something else I needed to let you know there? I don't think so. The topics today, we've, I think, advertised it as vision issues, but we're also glad to have a pharmacist here who will talk to us about how our pharmacists can help us with our healthcare. And so I would like to introduce Karen Miller first, and then we'll go on to the vision issues. But Karen is the manager of the Denali Pharmacy at the hospital here in Fairbanks. And I'm going to turn things over to her. So Karen, would you like to unmute yourself and speak up?
Sure. Thanks, Marianne. I do have a few slides. Is it all right to share my screen with you?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can make that happen. Yeah, it's always a question mark whether you share the right screen, right?
Yes.
So are you guys seeing some slides?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for jumping on. And I'm gonna preface it with that it's always great to talk to you guys. I wish I had more time to prepare and make a really dazzling presentation, except for I'm going to use the excuse of COVID and staffing, and every day is a new day and new things are happening constantly to us. So I would love to come back and be able to talk more about other topics. And I have pharmacists on staff now that are really willing to come back and talk to. So if you have other ideas, keep that in mind. So I'm just going to give you like a quick overview and talk a little bit about medications and falls risks. And I have some examples just to go over real quick, but basically, as you age, the body can handle drugs differently. You know, our kidneys don't hold up, our liver doesn't do as well as we age, and sometimes we have absorption issues that come into it, and then distribution issues. When we say that, let's see, I put this together real quick, and I probably put this on the wrong slide. Look at that. Yep, I shouldn't be allowed to make slides. So just a little bit about the absorption of drugs. Sometimes it depends on how you absorb it. You know, your skin can get thinner as you age, and it can affect how you absorb topical items. Sometimes people have GI issues that have arisen over time, and then like Crohn's and celiacs can affect the absorption of drugs. And sometimes it's medications, other medications you're taking, especially something like Protonics or Prilosec over time, can cause you to have some absorption issues of some minerals like magnesium. The other thing is medications are distributed throughout the body, and sometimes how the blood flow works can affect how the drugs are taken to where they need to work. Metabolism of the drugs, how they break down in the body, either by the liver with the liver enzymes that are affected. So if you have liver function tests that are elevated, sometimes that can affect and show us that maybe you might have a hard time breaking down drugs. Elimination of the drugs or the removal of the drugs out of the system, the filtration system of the system, of the kidneys. As we age, it's natural for our kidney functions to decrease a little bit, but then some people have more decrease than others. So they have kidney disease or end-stage renal disease, and that affects the elimination of drugs. All these processes play into how long does the drug stay in the body, and therefore it could hang around or it can build up more and give you more side effects. And a lot of the side effects of drugs can lead to the issues of falls. And so a lot of times as a pharmacist, we're screening, is this the right drug, right dose? But also we're looking at your age, and then we're sometimes looking at your kidney function to see how this works. Yeah, I lost a lot of slides. They just went poof. Isn't that funny? So one of the list of drugs, it's not even on there. The high-risk medications in older adults, there's a whole list of them and classes. Medication classes commonly implicated in falls are, well, we know sedatives and hypnotics, antipsychotics, antidepressants, anticholinergics, which is hard class for most people to know what that is. A lot of times it has to do with drugs helping with nausea and vomiting, and antidepressants and antihistamines. Cardiac meds, ones that affect blood pressure and then can affect your cardiac output, can also lead to falls. Pain medications, because of dizziness, drowsiness, can make you feel just kind of out of sorts. And then anticonvulsants are another class of medications. Older adults are at increased risk of experiencing medication adverse events, including what we call falls. Falls are an adverse event. So when we talk about each individual class, like the sedatives and hypnotics, we say the possible adverse reactions that can happen with it is like cognitive impairment. They can just make you feel a little confused. They can give delirium. They can make you tired. A lot of those in the sedative and hypnotics are drugs, brand names like you've heard before, like Valium, Ambien, that kind of thing. Antipsychotics, I hate the name antipsychotics because it lends to people thinking of psychosis, but they're used a whole lot for a whole number of things, like Haldol or haloperidol is one of the drugs we use a lot to use in uncontrolled nausea and vomiting with people with cancer treatment, but it's an antipsychotic. But you have to be careful with those drugs because it can impair your psychomotor functions, your mobility, can affect speech, and it can. Rapid response, Women's Center, room 209. Sorry. Response, Center, room 209. So olanzapine is also known for causing like orthostatic hypotension. Olanzapine at higher doses we use as an antipsychotic. As lower doses, we can help with sleep disturbances and with nausea and vomiting. Antidepressants is another drug class. Same thing as antipsychotics, can impair psychomotor function, sometimes can lead to just passing out or fainting. And those drugs include like fluoxetine, sertraline, citalopram. The brand names that we know are like Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil. Then you have a whole bunch of anticholinergics, like I talked about earlier, that can cause sedation, confusion, hypotension, delirium. As you notice, there's a common theme here. Drugs that can cross the CNS barrier that causes sedation are a big cause of it. Cardiac drugs. I actually have an example of this just recently with my mom. She called me the other night. She was with my aunts and she goes, I've been dizzy for 2 days. And then I just realized I messed up my blood pressure meds. I didn't put a blood pressure med in the last 3 nights pill box. Then, so I haven't taken it. So her blood pressure was really high and she was walking in Walmart and she felt really dizzy. So that's an example of where the meds, when taken right, can help you. When taken incorrectly, sometimes can lead to the potential for falls. Same with drugs used for urinary retention, BPH, they can cause orthostatic hypotension. That means when you stand up and you have that kind of head rush, dizziness, blackout feeling, those are common with those drugs. Sometimes you can help with that is by slowly rising when you know you're on certain medications that can cause dizziness on rising. Pain medications can cause dizziness and CNS depression, which is what we call respiratory depression. It can slow down your breathing. You slow down your breathing, it causes all kinds of things. So we want to use some caution in the opiates. And then anticonvulsants. And when we say anticonvulsants, there's a whole slew of people that tend to be on anticonvulsants now, because gabapentin is a drug that's used for neuropathic pain for diabetics that helps with the pain, the tingling in the extremities. That is considered an anticonvulsant. So sometimes when we say a drug class, people go, well, I don't have any seizures, but sometimes you're taking the medications that potentially could be in these drug classes. And once again, that can impair your mobility, you're able to function. It can impair your psychomotor skills. So the big thing is the risk of taking some of these drugs as your age increases, and a lot of the side effects can lead to the potential for causing falls. And so the biggest thing is, how do we prevent it? That slide works. So how do you prevent medication-related falls? And my biggest thing is, it's this example of a med list. Know your medications, be familiar with your medications, know what your medications do, know what diuretics do. Diuretics are in that class of blood pressure control meds. And the funny thing about diuretics is sometimes you can take it to remove the excess fluid, and it actually makes you kind of dry. That can actually change your volume of distribution and how the drugs are spread out in the body, and that can affect multiple things. It's like a cascading events kind of thing. So know your medications, know how to take them, be sure you're really, really careful about adherence. Like the example with my mom and her med box. I watched my mom fill the med box tons of times, and she was always really, really careful. This one time she filled the med box while she was chatting with my aunt and laughing, and she just forgot to put the blood pressure med in for 2 nights in a row. So know what the meds are, be familiar with them. And the other thing is, talk to your community pharmacist. We're quite knowledgeable in drugs, and we love to talk about them. And so we would be happy to look at your list and see if there's ones that potentially could increase your risk for falls. The other big thing is to use one pharmacy, because then we can look at your profile all at once and know if everything is working well together, and that there aren't any drug interactions that potentially could lead to increased side effects, which could lead to risk for falling. What we call medication review, it's always good to, when you have an appointment or when you're with the pharmacist and picking up a new drug, is to double check with them that there aren't any issues. And, you know, I know some people say, I don't want to bother the pharmacist, they're so busy, you know, the ones at the counters. And really, it's our job to ensure that you guys are safe and that you're taking the medications correctly. If they do need to take more time with you, sometimes we'll take your name and number and try to call you back later when we have a chance to really look at your list and make sure there aren't something that we're missing just at the quick look at the counter. So we just, I say, be friends with your pharmacist, because actually, you know, next month, October, is National Pharmacy Month, and we like to celebrate the services we can provide and why we're an important part of the healthcare team. And then there's a whole list of, years ago, I did a presentation with lifelong learning about medication adherence and tools and tricks to help you make sure you take your medications correctly. I have another story where a lady was getting her dog's meds ready and her meds ready, and her dog was on a really high dose amitriptyline, which is an antidepressant, which is one of the drugs that's increased risk for falls. She took that one instead of hers. She had them both in one in each hand, like one for Rover, one for me, and she reversed them. And she called me, and she was really lightheaded, drowsy, and it took a while to figure out what happened. She was okay, but she then, once she knew what happened, then she knew she had to be very careful about falls. That's the other thing I always, and you probably, I missed all the great classes this week because of working, but like I tell my mom, when you rise at night, make sure you're careful going to the restroom, make sure the paths are clear. She had to take an extra diuretic because of her blood pressure mix up, and it was in the evening. And I told her that she had to, just be careful about using the restroom later on that evening when you're tired. And it's just putting up safe parameters, understanding the meds and the pitfalls of them, and using your pharmacist. So I'm sorry, I apologize. The slides, I don't know what happened. I was between two computers and one turned off on me, so apologize. But if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Karen. That's great, a great overview. Quick, but if we do have maybe time for a couple questions, quick questions. Anybody want to chime in?
I have one question here.
Go ahead.
Who, in the event like of an independent person at home that's always done their meds and everything, who would be the overseer, maybe even randomly or weekly, every time those meds are laid out, to make who other than a med aid, which I understand is able to assist with that, if it's all contractual and whatnot, legal, but who is the person that is to just kind of manage that? Would that just, other than a case manager, in the event that they're being provided for at home? Because medication is a big deal, and so is oxygen. And a lot of people don't know how to operate that other than a skilled provider.
Right.
But what is your take on that? There's a lot of different scenarios people like to have in their home, but what is the safest for the client and the most legal at home?
So there, and I'm not versed in the med aids and what's available, and I probably should. I'll become better friends with Mary Ann here and know what all services that are provided. I can tell you some of the pharmacies in town provide, like Alaska Family Pharmacy. They have the bubble packs on the cards that you can do that. There are some mail order pharmacies that will package medications. Denali Pharmacy was gearing up to offer a community packaging services when kind of COVID hit. And, you can see it on the news and in the paper that staffing has been an issue in healthcare for a while. So basically, eventually we hope to provide a service, but outside of that, who helps them fill their Medisets or their boxes? Like my mom is very capable most of the time. I've watched her. You can kind of screen people to see if they're able to do it and if they have a good system. The other thing is a lot of friends and family tend to help with medications. And then I don't know, Mary Ann, maybe you can speak to other services that are in the community.
I'm not really sure, but Aging at Home doesn't do this. We don't do medical stuff except call on you folks for information. One resource though might be contacting ADRC at the Senior Center, the Aging and Disability Resource Center. they may have ideas. Access Alaska, perhaps, may be able to do something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
wish I had samples, but to show you
Yeah.
our packaging, but I forgot to bring in.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea, especially if it's done by the medicine people, you know.
Yeah.
In the event
Yeah.
that, you know, not everybody has people close enough to be that attentive altogether. You know, a lot of people, especially friends of maybe elderly or vulnerable people, are very limited
Right.
in what they are able to be supportive of, you know.
We have another question in the chat room.
Okay, go
Someone
ahead
says,
quickly. Yeah.
I live in Washington State where cannabis is legal. A lot of folks use it for pain relief, both as a cream or orally. Any wisdom on how one can use it to help with pain, but not compromise one's functioning?
I'm going to probably plead out on this question. In my world, cannabis is a Schedule I controlled substance. So as a pharmacist, I don't dispense it. And honestly, the reference books out there don't have a whole lot of information about drug interactions or potential, but you do still have the ability that affects the CNS system. So you still want to use caution with those drugs. The other thing it's hard to comment on is because it's not USP regulated. So you don't, meaning USP pharmacopoeia is that what is the units in each product. So it's hard for us to comment on it because it's not heavily regulated like it is in our world. So I don't, and a long short answer is, I'm sorry, I can't really comment too much. I would talk to your primary care providers so they're aware of that, that's on board.
I think we probably ought to go on to our next speaker at this point, but thank you so much for joining us, Karen. It was great.
No, thank you for working with me.
Okay, I would like to introduce John Clare, who is joining us from Soldotna, and he is a certified vision specialist who can talk about vision issues and especially things that happen in the eye as we get older, whether you've got disease or not. But he can talk a lot more about that and how he's been involved in this area for a long time. John?
Well, good afternoon.
Just one thing,
Yes.
since John isn't using share screen, it's easier to see him if you go to speaker view on your computer.
Right.
In the upper right corner.
Got it. All right. I'm going to see if I can. How do I make mine full screen? I think I'm. All right. I see you talking, Marianne, but I don't hear you. I think you're muted.
I guess automatically that happened or something. But you are full screen now, John. I can see
Okay,
your
good.
face and the whiteboard.
Yeah, I don't need to see me. So can you guys see my fancy paper
Yes.
here?
Yes, we can see that.
All right. All right. So this is a low-tech slideshow. Marianne asked me to talk a little bit about who I am and what my certifications are. And so I will do that briefly. My name's John Clare. I live in Soldotna. I started teaching school in 1980, 81 in Kodiak and taught for a number of years. And I always had kids in my classrooms who were always had one or two who were visually impaired or blind, and just was fascinated with the whole field, I guess. I liked the people that came to work with my students, and they just seemed like a neat bunch of people. And so in 1994, I had the opportunity to go down to Texas Tech University and go through the graduate program there in low vision. And so I did that. And following that, I did an internship at the American Lake Veterans Hospital near Tacoma. And while I was there, was contacted by a guy by the name of David Jacobson, who was the director of the of Access Alaska in Fairbanks. And he really, I don't know if you guys, many of you folks knew David or not, but he was a super neat guy. He was a good director, and he had a vision impairment himself. And so he had a real kind of a soft spot for folks with vision impairment and blindness. And he wanted to hire me to come to Fairbanks and work full-time for Access as a low vision specialist. But we lived on the Kenai, and I didn't want to move to Fairbanks. So we've moved back to Kenai, and I agreed to come up and contract with Access Alaska 1 week a month. And I did that for 7 or 8 years. And so during that week a month, I'd travel around Fairbanks and I traveled between Tok and Barrow, I guess. Did a lot of village travel, working with seniors, folks over the age of 55 who had a vision impairment or were blind. And just had a great time. Met a lot of super neat people. It was a great experience. And eventually David decided that he really needed a full-time person. And so, to make a long story short, I conned my sister Bonnie Lowe into filling that position. But she went out, got her master's in low vision, came back to Fairbanks and worked as a low vision specialist for quite a while. So that's it in a nutshell. If you look at my page here, essentially I have two certifications. One is an orientation and mobility instructor, or an O&M specialist, we say, and 2 is a teacher of the blind and visually impaired. Both of those are add-ons to a type A teaching certificate. And so all state agencies, federal agencies, anybody that works with visually impaired and blind people, children or adults, require a master's degree in this field. And so once you've got it, then you become what's called a certified vision specialist. And so that's me. During that 8 years, I contracted with a lot of other agencies also, Tanana Chiefs, Southeast Alaska Independent Living. So I traveled all through Southeast, working with visually impaired and blind adults. Contracted with Lower Kuskokwim School District, Sitka School District. I contracted with the Kenai week a month for about 5 years. So I've seen hundreds and hundreds of visually impaired and blind seniors in their homes. And so I've got a pretty good grasp on what life is like for a wide variety of adults who experience vision impairment. And I know a lot about falls, unfortunately. I've seen lots of reasons why people fall. And, among visually impaired and blind people, vision is not always the reason that they fall. And that's why I like, this broad approach you've taken to understanding why people fall. From pharmacy, you've talked to OTs and PTs, and, we're a complex organism. And so when any system goes haywire in our body, the opportunity or chances to fall really go up. And the more systems that fail or we struggle with, the higher the likelihood of having something happen. So anyway, I'm going to go over some basic terminology here. I'm assuming that most folks don't know a lot about vision. So I want to cover some basic terms. One of the main things that people ask me right out of the box is, what's the difference between an optometrist and an ophthalmologist? And so we'll cover that. I'm going to talk about some acuity and contrast, and then some of the things that go on between the eye and the brain that can complicate our ability to move smoothly and without falling. So an optometrist is a person with basically a PhD in vision. And so their primary job is to look at our eyes, give us a routine eye exam. They're trained to spot whether something's wrong with our vision, with the mechanics of the eyeball. And they're trained to help us find the right glasses. So they do what's called a refraction. We go in to see the optometrist. A lot of times they'll dilate our eyes, and then they use their equipment to measure various things in our eyes, the length of our eyeball, the lens system, and all of that. And then they give us a prescription, and that's where we get our glasses. An ophthalmologist is a medical doctor. They're somebody who's been to medical school. They're a trained doctor who's decided to specialize in eyes. And so they get a lot more training in the field of vision. And typically they're surgeons, and they can also prescribe glasses. You know, they will if you want them to, but they may tell you to go to an optometrist to do that. And sometimes there's conflict between these two fields. Sometimes the optometrists think they should do things that the ophthalmologist is doing, and sometimes the ophthalmologist, you know, is missing some things that optometrists can do. But in the ideal situation, they're working together for your best interest. I will say, based on my experience, that it's really important. Marianne and I talked about this yesterday or day before. It's really important to find an ophthalmologist if you experience any kind of vision problem that you like, that you can communicate with, that can be human with you, somebody with good bedside manner. Because it's been my experience, if you're working with an ophthalmologist, let's say you've got glaucoma, and that ophthalmologist is off-putting, or somebody that you don't particularly care for, bad bedside manner, whatever, they're in a hurry, you won't hear what they have to tell you. And sometimes, and I've seen this happen, they will prescribe medication and you may not take it. I could tell you some horror stories about that. So we've got some great ophthalmologists in the state, and if you go to one that you don't like, find another one. So that's the difference between those two. And I don't know, Marianne, do you want to, if folks have questions, do you want to save that to the end, or do you want to read chats? Or I think you're muted again, Marianne.
Why don't we save that to the end? Save questions to the end, okay?
Right. So save your questions, and then, but also be thinking about questions that you have about yourself or family members, and we'll try and answer those if I can. So let's move on down to acuity and contrast. These are the two things that most often result in falls. And I'm going to give you a brief description of what those two terms are. Acuity refers to how clearly we see things or don't see things. And often that's measured using a Snellen eye chart. And that's the eye chart that gives numbers. So you may go to the optometrist and he says, well, you're 20/40 or you're 20/80 or 2100. And what he's saying there, or she is saying, is that let's say you're me. Without my glasses, I have 2200 vision. That means that I've got to be 20 feet from something a person with normal vision can see at 200 feet. So if you've got 20/40 vision, you've got to be 20 feet from something a person with normal vision can see at 40 feet. And so acuity can mean a lot of different things depending on what's going on with your eyes. If you've got macular degeneration, acuity is different. You know, how sharply you see things is different than it would be if you had retinitis pigmentosa or diabetic retinopathy or some other eye disease. So it's kind of a catch-all term, but it basically means, you know, how clearly, how sharply can you see things? If you don't see things sharply or clearly, you're you know, increase your chances of falling. So, and we'll come to that. I'm going to talk about, if we don't run out of time, a little anatomy of the eye, and I can talk more about both of these things in detail. But contrast refers to, it's kind of self-explanatory, but it refers to our ability to separate one surface from another. And so a good example of that would be in commercial buildings. A lot of times according to code, buildings will put heavy black tape or material on the edge of steps. And so as you're walking down the steps, you can see where the next step is by virtue of that heavy contrast that's on the lip of the step. So contrast is all important. And when I talk about the eye, I'll talk more about that. A lot of things can decrease our ability to see contrast. Cataracts can do that. As we get older, our retinas age and our eyes don't see contrast as well as they used to. And we'll get into more of that. So contrast can contribute to a lot of falls. Just a brief example of that is, you know, being in Fairbanks, going out on a flat light day, you know, and you step out of your house and you've got flat light and a lot of fog, you have no contrast whatsoever. You're walking through a jar of milk. And so when something does pop up out of that, it helps you understand where you are. So another thing that we need to talk about are the mechanics of the eye, how life experience affects your vision, and how tenacious you are. There's some psychosocial things that are really important to be able to function independently if you've got a vision impairment. So we'll talk about the mechanics of the eye a little bit and how the brain interprets the information that the eye gets. When I flip this chart over, life experience has a lot to do with it, and I'll describe that briefly. I got a referral from a home health nurse in Anchorage quite a few years ago to go see a guy by the name of Ed Monahan, who had macular degeneration. So part of what I do when I show up at somebody's house is say, let's go for a walk. Sometimes I'll take them to the grocery store, we'll walk around the neighborhood, we'll go somewhere. I want to see how well do they move through space? How safe are they? How cautious are they? How confident are they? And so I took Ed out, and the guy was like, he was incredible. I mean, he went up and down stairs like nobody's business. You would never in a million years guess that he had as much macular degeneration as you could get. So we sat around after this evaluation. I said, Ed, I don't know how you do this. I mean, I've never seen anybody with that amount of macular degeneration be as good on their feet as you are. Well, he knew that I was a pilot. We'd been talking about airplanes, and he said, and Ed was a P-51 fighter pilot going back to Korea, the tail end of World War II in Korea, you know, which I don't know if you guys know this, but a P-51 has got a huge long nose. It's a low wing airplane. The forward visibility out of the thing is 0 when you're on the ground. And so he said, when you're landing your airplane, where do you look? And I don't know. I just look out the windshield, I guess. He said, no, you don't. You're paying attention to all of the information that's coming at you from your peripheral vision. And so he said, I flew for so many years that I don't need to see right in front of me. I can tell where I'm at and what's happening by the vision by what's happening in the periphery of my vision. And so I use Ed as an example because he's somebody who spent a lifetime moving through space, using vision, using his central vision, of course, but really relying on his peripheral vision to do what he needed to do. So Mary Ann and I talked about this the other day. If we contrast Ed with somebody who's, let's say, has led a fairly sedentary life, maybe academic life, or their life has been involved with near point activities, reading Bibles, knitting, sewing, reading anything, and not moving around a lot in space, those folks really struggle with something like macular degeneration because they have not essentially trained their brain to use their peripheral vision. And so macular degeneration affects about 5% of your central vision. That's it. So if you're sitting 4 or 5 feet away from somebody, your macula sees an area about the size of the other person's face. Everything outside their face is good peripheral vision, and macular degeneration doesn't affect that. So for folks who like Ed, who have macular degeneration, no big deal going up and down stairs, doing a lot of the things that they used to do. But for somebody who's spent a lifetime using their central vision, it can be really rough. So life experience plays into this a lot. Two people with macular degeneration are not going to share the same risk of fall. So the other thing is, the third thing down here is tenacity. You know, what do you do when you lose vision? How does that affect your life? Do you just, I've seen people who just give up and roll over, and other people who rise to the challenge and they're right in the middle of things. I'll use a friend as an example. When I well, I didn't quit contracting. I went to work for the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District in about 2005. And I was buried. We had a ton of low vision and blind kids in the school district. And I basically told them I was going to quit unless they hired somebody to help me. That was a challenge because there are very few people around trained like I am. And so we conducted a search around the country, had 2 applicants. One of the applicants was a woman from Ecuador who had lupus, and she was completely blind from lupus. She needed either a wheelchair or walker to get around. But we could tell in the interview that she had tenacity with a capital T. I mean, she was just full of spit and vinegar. So we hired her, and she turned out to be a fantastic coworker. Most people, if most people experienced 10% of what Jordana dealt with on a day-to-day basis, they'd give up. I mean, it was her physical disability and her blindness would be insurmountable to most people. But that was not, and on top of that, English was her second language. So she had it all, but had tenacity. And so again, you know, 2 people can experience the same amount of vision impairment, and the tenacious one is going to fall less. They're going to enjoy life more. And so we all know people, you know, we know people that are knocked down by things, and other people that survive. So these are the psychosocial things that play into having a vision impairment and decreasing the likelihood of having a fall. I was thinking about this the other day. I was driving around town and I had the radio blaring in my pickup. And I was trying to find something, and I turned the radio down because I was trying to look for a sign. And later on I thought, why in the world did I turn the radio down to see something better? And I'm probably not the only person in the world that does that. Our eyes see things, but our brains interpret what we see. And I'm going to talk more about this in a minute. Our brains are like a photo lab. And so because our vision is so powerful, it can override the other senses that we have. And as an example, when I teach somebody with a significant vision impairment who may be anticipating blindness, I'll put them under a blindfold. I've got a blindfold that I use, and I teach them to use a white cane. Inevitably, when I'm doing my initial evaluation, a person's stability can be really poor. They walk cautiously, trouble going up and down stairs. They may not leave their home. I can't tell you how many times I've taken somebody like that to a set of stairs, put a blindfold on them, and asked them to walk up or down the set of stairs, and you would think that they didn't have a vision impairment. So they're able to move through space better with no vision because they're relying on their body's this proprioceptive, kinesthetic, vestibular, all of these systems that we have in our body to help us move through space. They can rely on those things, and this super powerful sense that we have, vision, is gone. You know, it's when it's removed, and they can pay attention to all of this other stuff. And so as that pertains to falls, to this extent, a lot of times I think that, when somebody who has a vision impairment, whether it's a cataracts or whatever, is you're moving through space and moving through complicated environments. We're always thinking about where we're going. What are we going to do next? And maybe let's be efficient and carry something from the dining room to the living room, or we're multitasking all of the time. And so it's my experience that it's a good idea not to get too carried away with multitasking if you've got a vision impairment. Focus on where you're going and what you're doing, and don't be trying to do too many things at once. Don't be driving the car looking for a sign and with the radio on super loud. So, how are we doing on time?
We've got, about 15 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll draw you some pictures and we'll wrap this up. I'll talk for about 10 minutes and then say leave 5 at the end to answer any questions.
Okay.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how a camera and an eye are similar. So camera is a box with a couple of lenses attached to it. And so when we want to take a picture, we point the camera, let's say at a tree over here. I don't know, Marianne, can you see any of that?
Sure.
So we point the camera at our tree, and light bounces off of that tree, and the light rays go through this lens system, and an image appears back here on the film, or in the back of the camera, not on the film yet till we push the shutter. Kind of fuzzy. So we adjust the lens system until that tree appears sharply. And when we get to see the tree sharply, clearly, we would say we have good acuity on the tree. We push the shutter button, the aperture opens up quick and exposes the film. And then we send the film off to the photo lab, and they make sense out of the data that's on the film, essentially. Well, an eyeball is the exact same thing. So the eyeball is just a round camera, essentially. And it has 2 primary lenses in it, the cornea and then the interior lens, the focusing lens that's inside your eye. And light rays, we want to look at the same tree. Light rays bounce off of the tree. They go through the cornea, this clear round lens in the front of your eye. You know, that dome-shaped thing that you see in the front of your eye? The light rays pass through your pupil, which is the hole in your iris. Think about your iris as like a colored paper plate with a hole in the middle of it. And so the light passes through that hole. It passes through this focusing lens that's suspended inside your eye. And then an image appears back on the back of your eye. On the film, we call it the retina. And the tree is upside down again, just like in the camera. But it's a fuzzy tree. And so your brain says, I don't like that. Let's make it sharp. And so your brain controls these muscles that surround this focusing lens, which is it's like a sphincter muscle. And so when it scrunches down, it causes this interior lens to get thick. And when it opens up, expands, it causes the lens to get thin. And in the process of getting thicker and thinner, it's improving the image that's appearing on the retina. And when that tree appears sharply, you're happy with what you see. You like that. And so the back of your eye is lined with, this retina is lined with cells called rods and cones. And rods are what help us see motion, and cones are what help us see color. Most of the cones in a retina are in the area called the macula, which is about the size of a number 2 pencil eraser. Everything outside of that primarily are rods. And so we use this data that our retina collects, then leaves the retina through the optic nerve, and it goes to the back of our brain, to the visual cortex, and the brain develops the picture just like the photo lab develops the film. And so that, in a nutshell, is how your eyes work. it'd take a long time to talk all about all of the mechanics of macular degeneration and glaucoma and all of these things. But it is helpful to know something about the function of the eye so you can understand why one vision impairment is drastically different than another, can be drastically different. So we don't have time to go into all of these different things. I don't know how much more you want to know about all of this, Mary Ann, do you think?
Well, there are some things that are not necessarily diseases, but the structure of the eye changes a little bit in everybody, right? As you get older.
Right.
So everybody's going to see things a little bit differently.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about one of those things. So as we age, cataracts are inevitable. So let's talk about what a cataract is. Cataract is when this interior lens becomes cloudy and stiffens up. And so most folks begin to experience that stiffening when they're maybe in their mid to late 30s or 40s. And so, you want to read something and you're holding it out about 14 to 16 inches, and suddenly you can feel that muscle in your eye straining. It's trying to squeeze this lens down a little bit to make it thicker, to make it more powerful, but it can't do it anymore because that lens has gotten stiff. And so then next thing we know, we go to the optometrist and he gives us a bifocal of some sort, what's called a plus lens. It's just a little tiny, a magnifying lens, +1.5, +2. And, or he says, go to the drugstore and get yourself some, reading glasses, or he'll prescribe them for you. And so he's adding the power to your lens system, your natural lens system, that your eye can't provide anymore. And that's okay. But as time goes on, for lots of different reasons, that lens becomes cloudy too. And so it becomes yellowish. And as that happens, less and less light gets into your retina and glare becomes a problem. And people who are driving at night say, man, I look at the oncoming cars and I just see these like starbursts of things. And so the denseness and the cloudiness of that lens becomes what we call a cataract. And once they reach a certain stage, whether it's in one eye or both eyes, the ophthalmologist, the eye surgeon, the doctor says, let's get rid of those things. And so they may do it, or they may send you to the Pacific Cataract Laser Institute, for example. And so what those guys do is go through, make a little incision in the eye, and they have special tools that remove your natural lens, to pull that out, leaving the capsule that lens was in, and then they slide in a new lens called an IOL, intraocular lens, and that's just a little plastic lens that is designed to provide you with the power that you would normally need to see it far, and so, or near, whatever it is that you want. So, for example, I'm without my glasses, I'm 2200. When I go to get my new glasses, they say I have a prescription of -3 diopters. And so they know exactly what it would take, what kind of lens it would take for me to see clearly at far. A lot of people go get, they have cataract surgery done and they don't need their glasses for distance anymore. Guess what happens? They don't fall as much. They don't fall as much because they're not trying to deal with these bifocals that totally blur everything underfoot. And so cataracts are, Mary Ann, that's a good example of some, just a common aging thing that isn't necessarily a disease process.
And it's just amazing that surgery works so well. We've only got about 5 minutes left. So are there any questions for John? If you want to unmute yourself.
I have a question. Thank you. John, it's all very interesting how this is all correlated to balance. Another question I have is, and I've noticed this in my experience in working in geriatrics extensively and whatnot, is why aren't people always getting a good referral from an optometrist for any of those like indiscrepancies in the eye and whatnot that could be looked at by a specialist? Why are those not being pointed out, and why aren't people being referred out when there is an indiscrepancy, even if it is related to age related or maybe genetics? I've worked with a lot of people extensively where that's getting missed in geriatrics.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a darn good question. I don't know. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had two friends recently be diagnosed by optometrists with macular degeneration, and they told me about it, and I said, well, have you seen an ophthalmologist? And they said no. So I sent them to an ophthalmologist that I like in Anchorage, and turns out they didn't have macular degeneration. So these guys are just human. They can miss things. Why folks don't refer people to somebody that has more expertise in the area, I don't know. That's a good question. Wish I could answer that for you.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of ophthalmologists. I like optometrists too, but my stock answer is if you've got anything going on funny with your eyes, something that makes you uncomfortable, or you've got you don't like what you hear from the optometrist, go to a good ophthalmologist and let them do a good dilated eye exam. Everybody should have a dilated eye exam by an ophthalmologist after age 50. One of the reasons for that is that your retina is the only part of your body where an MD can examine your circulatory system, for example. If you have hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, all sorts of things can be seen with a good dilated eye exam by a medical doctor, an ophthalmologist. So it should just be a routine thing as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Barbara, were there questions in the chat?
Yes, there's one question. There are two questions now. Does LASIK eye surgery in the 30s prevent glaucoma, cataracts, or macular degeneration?
That's a good question. I don't know that LASIK will prevent any. LASIK is not going to prevent any eye disease process. So maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly. The risk of LASIK is, it's really low, although I know, most of the ophthalmologists that I know wear glasses, and I'm a fan of glasses because they're a great way to protect your eyeballs from injury. So, but I know a lot of people that have had LASIK and love it, but yeah, LASIK is not going to slow down or prevent any eye diseases from happening.
Okay, one more question. Are punctal tear duct plugs useful in treating dry eye?
I don't know about that. That's outside of the realm of my expertise. I know a lot of people who have had their punctum cleaned out so that their eye can drain like it should. So, but I don't know much about the plugs. And yeah, that's, ophthalmologists specialize as well. And so there are ophthalmologists who specialize in the anterior part of the eye, the front part of the eye, and others who specialize in the posterior part of the eye. And so if you do go find an ophthalmologist, look for one who's specializes in the part of the eye that you're talking about. So if you're having trouble with dry eye or glaucoma or corneal problems, you're going to want to find somebody that understands, that specializes in the front part of the eye. And that's always a good thing to do. Sorry, I can't answer that question.
Thank you, John. That's really been informative. And I guess it's 5 o'clock. My cat is telling me it's time for supper, actually. I want to thank, and this is the end of our week. We've had a wonderful group of speakers, and I think it's just wonderful. We've been so pleased to have everybody join us. And I also want to thank Barbara Lando, who's helping me with the chat, and also is chairman of Aging at Home Fairbanks, and Joy Klein, who's our program director, getting all of these sessions going each day, and many other members of Aging at Home Fairbanks. I just wanted to let you know that the meetings have been recorded, as I said, and they are available on our website, which is www.aahfairbanks.org. And on the homepage, you can scroll down to the bottom on the right-hand side. There's a section that is Falls Prevention Awareness Week. And there are the recordings there, but also PDFs of the slideshows that have been shown, which would help you get to the references that I know some people have put in. So, and that information is on our website, aahfairbanks.org, or just Google search for Aging at Home Fairbanks and you'll find it. But also you'll be getting an email probably next week from our program director about the recordings and the information there. And you can contact us anytime if you if you can't find it. You're welcome to share this information. We are glad to have so many people who've come to the meetings, but if you want to share with family and friends, that's just great. We hope you'll do that. I did that with my two sisters from Illinois and Minnesota, and they've been attending the meetings, which is great. So thank you so much for being here. And I think we'll have to wrap it up, but we really appreciate you being here. I hope you've learned as much as I have. Thanks.
I'm going to just jump in and say to John that I know Bonnie, and she's a great person. So it's lovely to know her.